Saudi Arabia declared at the beginning of October that it would maintain its voluntary 1 million barrels per day, BPD, oil production cut until the end of the year, and that it was in talks with the United States, which was mediating a deal on the rehabilitation of Saudi-Israeli relations. The Middle East is the world's leading exporter of crude oil and the region with the largest oil transportation choke point, but the attack on Israel by Hamas on October 7 and the Israeli response that followed, which targeted Gaza, upended the geopolitical landscape there once more. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia, is the unpredictable factor in the most recent war in the Middle East, according to Reuters George Hay. The United Arab Emirates, UAE, a major oil producer, and other Middle Eastern nations began to improve their relations with Israel at the same time as the October 7 Hamas attack. According to reports, the US administration was also seeking to normalize relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Saudi Arabia, the biggest exporter of crude oil, may be willing to increase its oil output early in the following year from its current level of about 9 million barrels per day, BPD, if oil prices rise too high to gain the support of the US Congress. Days before the latest crisis erupted and dashed hopes of an impending Saudi-Israeli reconciliation that could have alleviated the tight global oil market, the Wall Street Journal reported on a potential arrangement that would have resulted in Saudi Arabia recognizing Israel in exchange for a defense accord with the US. Now that sanctions against Iran's oil exports are being more strictly enforced by the United States, the market is debating whether to factor in an even tighter supply. Due to what looks to be laxer enforcement of US sanctions, Iran's oil supply, which had been increasing in recent months to a 2018 high, may start to decline once more, according to analysts. Along with the other Muslim countries in the area, who happen to be some of the top oil producers in the Middle East and globally, Saudi Arabia, which just established diplomatic ties with Iran, is supporting the Palestinian cause in the most recent conflict. Following the Hamas attack, Saudi Arabia demanded that the two sides immediately cease their escalation of hostilities, protect people, and exercise restraint. But the kingdom also made a veiled reference to Israel, recalling its previous warnings about the dangers of a situational explosion brought on by the occupation's continuation, the denial of the Palestinian people's legal rights, and the recurrence of systematic provocations against its sanctuaries. According to people with knowledge of the kingdom's thinking, the Saudi strategy in the area is rapidly changing, and US intentions to normalize Saudi relations with Israel are shelved, according to Reuters last week. The two leaders spoke by phone for the first time last week when Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi called Mohammed bin Salman. In the call, the Crown Prince underlined the kingdom's unwavering stance in standing up for the Palestinian cause and supporting efforts aimed at achieving comprehensive and fair peace, according to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia sponsored an emergency meeting of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation following this week's deadly attack on a hospital in Gaza, which directly blamed Israel. The Executive Committee of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation strongly condemns the blatant targeting of Al-Ali Baptist Hospital in Gaza Strip by Israel's brutal occupation forces, as well as the blatant and unprecedented Israeli aggression in the occupied Palestinian territory and the heinous massacres committed against civilians there. The US-Saudi relationship has been strained under President Joe Biden, and the production cuts by Saudi Arabia and OPEC Plus intended to stabilize the market but actually driving up oil prices, have widened the gap between the kingdom and the Biden administration, which has been working to control high gas prices for US consumers. According to CEO Amin Nasser earlier this week, the Saudi oil behemoth Aramco presently has 3 million BPD of spare oil production capacity. According to Nasser, the biggest oil company in the world could increase production in a couple of weeks if necessary. Despite strong market demand and Wednesday's request from Iran for an oil embargo on Israel from the Islamic producers, neither the Saudis nor the Saudi-Russian-led OPEC Plus alliance have yet indicated any change in the existing policy to withhold supply to the market. In response to the Iranian call for an oil embargo on Israel over the conflict with Hamas in Gaza, the OPEC Plus group does not intend to take any immediate action or conduct an exceptional meeting, according to OPEC Plus sources who spoke to Reuters on Wednesday. Oil prices could rise to $95 or perhaps $100 per barrel amid the Middle East's current geopolitical uncertainty, but the US shouldn't rely on Saudi Arabia to control a price increase. To fund the showpiece megaprojects of Mohammed bin Salman and Putin's war in Ukraine, the Saudis and the Russians, respectively, need high oil prices. According to industry and trade data collated by Reuters, OPEC had a record low percentage of India's oil imports between April and September as the third largest crude importer increased purchases of Russian crude. According to vessel tracking data quoted by Reuters, Indian imports of Russian crude oil more than doubled to 1.76 million barrels per day, BPD, between April and September, the first half of India's 2023-2024 fiscal year, from 780,000 BPD in the same time of the 2022-2023 year. Over 80% of the crude oil that India uses is imported. The nation has dramatically increased its imports of less expensive Russian crude oil, which is prohibited in the West, over the past 1.5 years. According to a Reuters examination of data going back to 2001-2002, Russia held a 40% share of Indian crude oil imports in the first half of 2023-2024, while the share of OPEC suppliers fell to a record low of 46%. India imported 63% of its oil from OPEC between April and September of 2022. Russian imports have increased dramatically while purchases from Saudi Arabia, the major exporter of crude oil and a key ally of Russia in the OPEC Plus agreement, have decreased. India's imports of Russian crude increased in September after declining in July and August compared to the prior months. Indian refiners imported more Russian oil last month compared to a 7-month low in August because it was less expensive than Middle Eastern alternatives. India's imports of crude oil from Russia increased again as the market became more competitive, and Middle Eastern petroleum, especially that from Saudi Arabia, which has been increasing its contractual selling prices for Asia, became more expensive. Indian imports of Russian oil increased by 11.8% from August and by 71.7% from September 2022 to an average of 1.54 million BPD in September, according to tanker tracking data gathered by Reuters. According to people familiar with the arrangements, Reuters on Tuesday reported that Saudi Aramco, the largest crude oil producer in the world, has assured at least 4 refiners in North Asia that it will provide them with the full contractual amounts they have requested for November. Despite the high prices, one of the individuals told Reuters that the supply and demand for Saudi oil seems stable at this time. Thus, in accordance with the terms of their term contracts, Aramco will transport the entire volume of crude oil that at least 4 customers in North Asia have requested. The official selling price, OSP, for Aramco's premium crude grade for Asia was increased for a 5th consecutive month on Monday after Saudi Arabia last week extended its voluntary production cut of 1 million barrels per day, BPD, through December 2023. Saudi Arabia announced on Wednesday that it would continue to pump roughly 9 million BPD of crude oil in November and December while reducing production by an additional 1 million BPD. According to the Saudis, this voluntary cut decision will be reviewed next month to consider deepening the cut or increasing production. Saudi Aramco increased the price of Arab Light, its flagship crude grade, for Asia for November loading a day after Saudi Arabia and Russia reaffirmed their continued oil supply cutbacks. The price rise for the Arab Light mix going to Asia was 40 cents per barrel, making it the 7th straight increase. This raised the OSP to $4 per barrel over the Oman/Dubai average, the Middle Eastern benchmark from which grades going to Asia are priced. Refiners and traders mostly anticipated the increase in Saudi pricing for the majority of grades to the majority of markets in November due to the strong demand and tighter supply as OPEC Plus and its major market players Saudi Arabia and Russia continue to limit crude oil output and exports. What are your thoughts on Saudi Arabia and OPEC Plus, and do you think they can overthrow the US economy? Let me know down below. If you want to continue to learn about business investing and financial education, we have got this video waiting on the screen for you to check out. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.